Hi, welcome to the Go Higher Frequency Astrology channel. My name is Suzanne. Join me as I investigate how the monthly cycles are progressing with a focus on how we can use this time more productively. 2026 starts with a bang, a full moon in Cancer with all of the personal planets out of bounds. It aspects the United States sun. I'll take a deep dive into this chart, plus a few important New Year's charts for 2026. I'll leave timestamps below, so feel free to jump around to the parts that interest you the most. Before I begin, I want to talk about the bigger picture for a minute. I have been working on a presentation for OPA, which happens in January. It's about the history and astrology of the Antichrist and how it relates to the growth of Christianity and America's self-understanding. As I was doing this historical research, the cycles became so much clearer to me. And this research has been rounded out by a book I recently received. It's called Persephone's Revolution, Pluto's Path to the End of Empire by Rosie. I've already been aware of this research, and I've even talked about it on this channel, but digging in, I realized how much it complemented and filled in my own research about the Antichrist, specifically how it informs these revolutionary periods when Pluto enters Aquarius. Rosie calls the periods that Pluto goes out of bounds to the north power periods, while periods when Pluto goes out of bounds to the south, reform periods. Power periods are synonymous with periods of revolutions involving empire expansions. It's outwardly focused, while reform periods are more internally focused revolutions. And the last power period we experienced was during World War II. That was when Pluto was out of bounds to the north in the sign of Leo. And now we are entering our final reform period as Pluto goes out of bounds to the south in its opposite sign of Aquarius. Now, this final out of bounds period will happen in short spurts over the next 10 years. We just entered a short period of this over the summer. And this is when we saw Gen Z toppling various governments that had become too corrupted. In the US, Pluto's journey to the south happens as a confrontation with presidential power. The current president was born when Pluto was out of bounds to the north. So it's understandable why he dredges up memories of the Nazi administration of World War II. But since he is ruling in the time of Pluto out of bounds to the south, expect the end results to be quite the opposite. The actions that are happening during this current period will likely drive future internal reforms. It doesn't mean that there won't be external wars, but the focus will be more internal. This time period of reform will be the last of the out of bounds periods for at least 3,000 years. What that means is not the focus of this current presentation, but I felt it was important to bring in the idea that while our current president seems focused on his expansion of his personal empire, the focus collectively is about reforming our current power structures so they work better for all of us. 2025 was a 9-year in numerology, and that 9-year lined up perfectly with the 12th house perfection year in the United States. It has certainly been a Plutonian year of destruction and shadow work, don't you think? It was a transition year, which is exactly what Pluto at the last degree of Capricorn predicted during the nomination of our current president. In 2026, we enter a 1 year, which is about new beginnings and fresh starts. A 1 year is about planting seeds, stepping into your own individuality and choosing a new direction for the decade to come. Focusing on personal power and bold steps rather than getting stuck in old patterns. But the United States does not officially enter this period until the solar return in July, lining up with our first house perfection year. A first house perfection year has similar themes. It's about planting seeds for a new cycle around the wheel. But with the seventh house sun, the US can only view itself through the reflection of the other. So it's no surprise that the United States first house perfection year has a seventh house theme, which I'll look at more specifically in a minute. But let's start by talking about the first full moon of the year, which aspects the Sibley Sun. Raven Caldera calls this the Sea Mother's moon. The Sea Mother fluctuates like the tides, motherly one moment and deadly the next. She is capricious and plays favorites. She grants mercy at her whim and condemns the next person merely because of her mood. She's all giving, yet sometimes withholds for no apparent reason. She is the place where water touches earth, creating the most nourishing places on the planet, but also eroding the ground and occasionally hitting it hard with a tsunami or two. It is impossible to understand her. The best we can do is love her and stand in awe, and try very hard not to offend her. In human design, this full moon is on the 4-6 cross of tension. Those born on this cross can destroy their networks because of their anger, the aggressiveness in opposition that prejudices investigations and limits trustworthiness, the power of adrenaline to provoke aggressiveness. This is the ultimate blaming line. They know who's to blame. The reason they're still afraid of tomorrow is because you couldn't do your shit. You couldn't do your thing. You couldn't get me to this place. You couldn't get me to that place. This full moon is related to the new moon that happened on July the 5th, 2024. If you have any natal planets close to the 13th degree of any sign, you might want to think about what happened back during this new moon. Is anything that you started during that new moon coming to fruition during this time? I have a Mars-Saturn opposition on this cross, and my Saturn is at 12 degrees Cancer. And it was the day after this new moon in 2024 that I received word that I had finally passed my PAA Level 1 Astrology Certification course. This is the course where you have to learn how to calculate charts by hand without using a computer. And I am not very great at technical tests. For some reason with this Mars-Saturn opposition, I have to challenge myself. And I find myself in this level 2 course having difficulties with learning how to hand calculate progressions. So I'm learning about perseverance with my Mars and Saturn opposition. It's like the story of the tortoise and the hare. If I just keep at it, I know that I will persevere. And that is what I'm learning in this lifetime. It's also the day before my partner's birthday. He and the United States were both born on the cross of individualization, except they were born on opposite sides of the cross. And my 7th house is ruled by Mars. So Mars configures in why I attracted this type of partner. And he also has a Mars-Saturn opposition, but in different signs. And we've had to learn about perseverance in our relationship. So think about any planets that you have at this degree. What are these new moons and full moons teaching you about yourself during this time? And the new moon came right after the 2024 solar return of the US Sibley chart. During that solar return, the moon happened to be at 29 degrees of Gemini in a square to Neptune, which at that time was also at the 29th degree of Pisces, foreshadowing the September eclipse at 29 degrees of Virgo. We had ideals for a future based on a past that was already in our rear view mirror. Speaking of out of bounds planets, the moon, Mercury, Venus, and Mars are all out of bounds in this full moon chart. It is quite rare to have so many planets all out of bounds at the same time. The full moon is out of bounds to the north, while while Mercury, Venus, and Mars are all out of bounds to the south. The north declination suggests an outward, expansive, self-assertive, and on top of the world energy, while south declination implies an inward, recessive, self-doubting, or deeply internalized influence often linked to past patterns. The full moon chart's ascendant, located in Washington, D.C., falls near the ascendant of the Sibley chart, and the full moon is right on the Sibley Sun, like I mentioned. It seems to reflect a manifestation of our past expansion that is now up for internal review. The recent emotional outburst about annexing Greenland is par for the course leading up to this full moon. This type of bluster is externalized so we can review it as a collective. If you remember, the new moon of July 2024 was a turning point in the 2024 election, and this is now coming up for review. Do we like the turn that we've made? Is it working for our country? The 13th degree is a Mars degree, while the 14th degree is a Venus degree. Venus and Mars are still on either sides of the sun, with Mars on the Venus degree. So we have been dancing lately with Mars and Venus themes, as well as Saturn and Jupiter themes. The Saturn and Neptune conjunction will be meeting in the Mars decan of Aries, while Pluto has been traveling the Venus decan of Aquarius. Uranus is retrograde for the last time in the Saturn's decan of Taurus before moving on to the Jupiter decan of Gemini. We are being held back from our worst Mars impulses. It's always hardest at the beginning of things, and we must cultivate patience. If we cultivate patience, the roadblocks that are meant to fall will fall without wasting so much of our precious energy. That is the wisdom of an emotional projector. If I wait, I find the right things move toward me without me having to chase those things and waste all of my energy to mixed results. The ruler of the 10th house, Mercury, is on the line of the heretic, which is about overt challenges to norms that will eventually be punished. The nodes are now in the channel of community, where the North Node is on the line of decapitation. Who from the administration will be on the chopping block during this full moon? The Human Design New Year chart confirms the necessity for patience. If we try to force things, they will not work. The Sibley Ascendant is on the IC of this chart with Black Moon Lilith, bringing a primal expression to the areas ruling our security. Mercury, ruler of the Ascendant and MC, is Cazimi the Sun, symbolizing the president and the administration working as one. Being Cazimi the Sun would normally strengthen Mercury, but both the Sun and Mercury are between two malefics. Mars in the final degrees of Capricorn on one side and Pluto in Aquarius on the other side. Sun, Mercury, Pluto, and Venus are all lined up in gate 41, which is the start codon for this new cycle. It's still internal energy, foundational, experimental energy in lines 1, 2, and 3. It hasn't started to reach out to spread to the collective, but Mars is still held back in the 60th gate, the gate of limitations, where Pluto has finally exited after so long, and it's fixed to its detriment in this line, which is about adapting to limitations. Its theme is about ignoring limitations and paying the price. This is where you desire to get away from limitations, but leaving the limitation will not work. The limitation will only follow you. Mars is the ruler of the 3rd and 8th house, symbolic of media, trade, and debts with other countries. In this chart set in Washington, D.C., Mars in the 5th house of creativity, entertainment, and gambling, is participating in a mini talent trine with Uranus in the ninth house, disruption in foreign relations, in our justice system, and Saturn and Neptune in the seventh, which is about our allies or open enemies. It seems to suggest a desire for taking risks, which is unadvisable at this time. Jupiter is in retrograde and it's moved back into gate 53 of new beginnings. It's conjunct the president's design Mars and Saturn. He has this unconscious drive and karma around starting new things before he's ready to move on, basically. And we've seen this. He's only focused on something for a short period of time, sometimes to his detriment or our detriment. And so he has to be brought back to finish those things. And Jupiter in the 11th house of diplomacy and the legislature both rules and is in trine aspect to the 7th house. Jupiter also rules the moon or the people, which is conjunct the north node and is rising on the descendant of this chart. Even though there is a deep drive to start something new, we need to be careful about the commitments we make to others. The fourth line is labeled assuredness, the ability to maintain the strength of one's individuality in complex and often awkward situations that ensure continued security and development. You notice that security, development, and protection, these terms are all around this aspect. For the abstract being, which Trump is one, their cycle is their well-being. If they cannot go through their cycle, it can become unhealthy for them. They must go through their cycle. All beginnings are confused. There's no way of knowing where the beginning will lead to. That is the process. The nodes are in the channel of community in this chart, and it's the only channel defined for the collective. So we'll collectively have the emotional willpower, a commitment to whatever community we align with this year. So let's take a look at the Aries Ingress Chart. You could say that the real New Year's chart is the Aries Ingress Chart. The U.S. Sibley's ascendant is on the descendant of this chart, similar to the Sibley's 2026 Solar Return Chart, which I'll get to in a minute. Like I mentioned earlier, it is through the other that the United States as a nation understands itself. Jupiter represents the elite, the ruling class, and it is the final dispositor of this chart. Jupiter in Cancer, having turned direct only 10 days earlier, sits in the second house of resources and rules both the 7th house, allies and open enemies, and the 11th house, the legislature and diplomacy. The sun, representing the country's leader, is intercepted in the 11th house between its ruler, Mars, and Neptune. Mars in Pisces is in the 10th house, separating from the north node. It's on that same 14th degree I was pointing to earlier. The 14th degree is considered a Taurus degree ruled by Venus. If you look to the degree after, the 15th degree, it's a Gemini degree ruled by Mercury. Mars is in gate 63. It's a mental gate. It's in line 4, which is about the willingness to forget the details in the glow of victory, with the possibility of the details coming back to bite you at a later date. It's interesting to note that Epstein had his natal Mars at 15 degrees of Pisces and his natal Venus at 16 degrees of Pisces. And 16 degrees is a Cancer degree ruled by the moon. His Venus and Mars were both in gate 63. In this chart, Mars is applying to a trine to its ruler, Jupiter. Trines are easy-flowing energies. Energy flows without effort. On the other side of the sun is Neptune at 1 degrees Aries, the exact degree of the IC of the Sibley chart. Neptune is like a mirage that can mask the details with its illusory qualities. But eventually the sun will meet Saturn. Saturn is the traditional ruler of the midheaven. it can represent the administration. Saturn, having just separated from Neptune, has transitioned to the gate of opinions. But in line 1, it can limit opinions to what is most pleasing to this administration. Mercury, ruler of the ascendant and the 5th house, can represent the media. It's retrograde within minutes of the North Node in Gate 37, line 3. Gate 37 is called the Friendship Gate. The 3rd line is a tit-for-tat energy. The media is learning how to adapt to what's acceptable or not in this new reality. The moon, the people, is also intercepted in the 11th house. The moon is at the exact degree of the Sibley Chiron. You see that the moon is separating from Venus and applying to transiting Chiron. The moon rules Jupiter, but Mars rules the moon, and Mars is in turn ruled by Jupiter. I would have thought that the Epstein scandal would have passed by now, but the more that I look at this chart, the more I see the Epstein scandal in it. There is a whole network of money laundering behind this scandal that is yet to be fully uncovered. And there were some rumors that the only reason Trump wanted to withhold the files was so he could release the most damning ones for the Democrats before the midterms. I share my Chiron with the United States, so I understand the United States wound better than anyone else. It's about gaining strength through adversity. It's learning to stand up for oneself and to not just passively follow along with what others demand of you. As a 50-year-old woman, the possibilities of running into men like Epstein and the people who followed him was pretty normalized. You might not have encountered this kind of wealth, but there was definitely a culture of men having easy access to young girls without consequence. Women didn't speak up because they were made the enemy. It was a reflection on you if you fell for a man's trickery. A transiting Chiron warns of overstretching. Another cautionary tale in this chart. As we have all witnessed these past few years, the direction of the wind can change on a dime, and if we aren't conscious, we can be caught off guard by that change. And disruption seems to be the name of the game early in the year. The new moon eclipse that happens right before the Aries Ingress is near the MC of this Aries Ingress chart. It's at the 28th degree of Aquarius, on the 5-1 cross of industry and square Uranus, which is still retrograde in Taurus. That eclipse falls on the descendant of the president's chart. This eclipse, along with the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, which happens immediately after, suggests sudden fractures and revolutions within organizations, businesses, and even the monetary system, especially cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. Some astrologers say eclipse energy has a 3 to 6 month window of influence before and after an eclipse. One such disruption that seems to have already started is at the Heritage Foundation. The organization was founded in 1973 when the sun was at 27 degrees of Aquarius. In a human design focused presentation late last year, I compared the charts of the Heritage Foundation and Project 2025, where I showed how they were manifesting their mission this year. But I also saw that it wouldn't last, because it was too extreme for the majority of people. Ever since I saw the Saturn-Neptune conjunction chart, I've wondered what revolution would take place during this conjunction. And I've often wondered if it might involve the generation that was born when Mars conjunct the North Node in Aquarius in 1971. Elon Musk happens to have his Mars in this gate of revolution, gate 49. I've also wondered if it's simply related to the Nixon shock, which happened that same year. The Nixon shock effectively ended the Bretton Woods Agreement, shifting the world to floating exchange rates. This major economic policy also included a wage price freeze and a 10% import surcharge to tackle inflation and trade deficits. And a recent article describes an aspect of this conjunction. When the dollar had monopoly power over global commodity pricing, America got a subsidy. The U.S. printed dollars. The world needed dollars to buy stock. So the world bought US debt, kept its interest rates low, and let Washington run deficits that would have sunk anyone else. Economists calls it exorbitant privilege. America has enjoyed it since 1945, which was the direct result of the Bretton Woods Agreement. That privilege is shrinking. Not disappearing, but shrinking. It might shrink a little bit more. As more commodities get priced in yen instead of dollars, demand for dollars softens. As fewer foreigners buy US debt, interest rates drift higher. As the dollar's purchasing power erodes, everything you import costs more, and this issue is compounded by the introduction of tariffs by this administration. The solar eclipse in August will be in Leo at the exact degree of the IC of this Aries Ingress chart on the 2-4 cross of explanation, which is the right angle side of the cross of revolution. It's the energy to beguile in many ways, to fool, to succeed despite ignorance. This is the line of acceptance, to accept that not everyone will understand, and to take advantage of that, even if it leads to disaster. The nodes will have transitioned into the Aquarius-Leo axis, straddling the ascendant-descendant of the president's chart, with the eclipse happening in his 12th house. But before the Leo eclipse, there will be the solar return of the United States. I won't speak in any detail of this chart, but suffice it to say it will be a difficult year with the ascendant-descendant flipped, Saturn applying to an opposition to Saturn, and Pluto applying to a conjunction with the South Node. Saturn will go retrograde in late July and will not perfect its opposition until March of 2027, when Pluto will also conjunct the South Node at that time. The last time the country experienced a Saturn opposition, Clinton was impeached for his inappropriate sexual relationship with Monica Lewinsky. And you see that Clinton is in the news once again for this kind of behavior. I also noticed a report released from the Epstein files describing a caller recounting events from 1997 during this same time period when Saturn was in Aries. This included claims that a woman and her daughters were introduced to wealthy individuals, taken to hotels, and provided money. The intake further states that after the woman reported what she said happened, she later died in January 2000 when Jupiter was in Aries and Saturn had gone into Taurus. Her death was ruled a suicide. But according to the document, responding officers reportedly did not believe it was a suicide at the scene. Pluto will be conjunct the Neptune and South Node conjunction of that chart in February of 2026. During the last opposition, Pluto was in Sagittarius, sextiling Uranus in Aquarius, and Neptune was applying to a conjunction with Uranus at the same time. Jupiter was also in Aquarius in a closing sextile with Saturn. The Clinton presidency was coming to an end. But this particular Saturn opposition with Jupiter in an opening trine relationship is similar to the opposition that happened prior to the Clinton impeachment. That was during the Vietnam War, when Democratic President Lyndon B. Johnson announced his resignation. Both MLK and RFK were assassinated that year, paving the way for Nixon's presidency the following year. This was the revolutionary time period of the Pluto-Uranus conjunction of the late 60s. That time period was the movement between power and justice, according to Rosie Flynn. Since 1989, we've been transitioning from a justice to a reform period, and we officially entered the final reform period this summer, which will last through 2035. This is the time of great uprisings by the people to institute change from within. A recent client and friend of mine asked me if 2026 would be less stressful than 2025. And I told her that stress is a response. While we can't control things like the weather, We can control our responses to things like the weather. Now, I know that's a lot easier said than done. I know that, but it's a practice and something we all must do to keep healthy during this time of massive change. Once we get past the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in late February, we'll have more clarity about where we're heading. Now, will that clarity be more or less stressful? It depends on how you look at it and how you receive that clarity. If you've learned to ride the wave of uncertainty, you know that you'll survive no matter which side of the wave you are dropped, because you will know there will be another wave to take you to the other side eventually. Nothing lasts forever, and that is both good and bad news. So practice your response. Have goals for where you want to end up, but become adaptable to those goals, because you cannot control the outcome of our future. You can contribute, but you cannot control it. And there are larger forces at work that we don't even understand during this time. But I hope that everybody has a fruitful year in 2026. And I hope that things start to look up, that we start to create good revolutions, that we start to build better outcomes for our children. That's my hope. And that's what I'm going to be focusing on in 2026. I'll see you next year.